Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Grimflayer. Hope you are all doing very well tonight. Been on a little bit of a roll lately, playing a lot of really fun games with this Golgari Midrange deck, and I've got another one here to show you. Now, we have won the die roll, so our luck has been turning for the better, getting to play a lot lately. And we've got a borderline hand, right? Now, the key cards in this hand are hopefully Treetop Village and Liliana the Last Hope. I say hopefully because if Assassin's Trophy has to be a key card early on in any given game, that is not ideal. If this is the type of matchup where we don't need to trophy right away, and instead the turn 1 Treetop Village for perhaps pressuring an opposing Planeswalker, and the turn 3 Lily for perhaps killing things repeatedly, killing weenies repeatedly, or just ticking up as a win condition. Those both look a lot better on the play. So if those end up being our key cards, this hand is good. It also brings yet more utility beyond Treetop with a mana base, which is nice. On the other hand, this could easily get very ugly very quick against a fair amount of decks in the format. That said, I tend to be conservative with my mulligans in game 1, and I try to look at the upsides. I don't think 5 landers are usually unreasonable. Of course, we'd want to see a payoff for that, like a tireless tracker, but again, being on the play, 2 of our 3 kind of linchpin cards look a lot better than they would on the draw. So I'm going to keep it, and we're going to see where it gets us. Our opponent will take a mulligan, and they will keep 6. All right. Treetop Village it is. Pass to you. Celestial Colonnade. Okay. I'm not worried about getting run over anymore. The high land count now looks really good. The Treetop Village still looks really good. The Field of Ruin looks very good against that Colonnade. And Liliana looks amazing. And Assassin's Trophy also looks amazing. And I will almost certainly not have to fire this off anytime soon, but I will be glad that I have it when I need it. So, our very borderline keep. Turns out this is a great matchup for it. We're against blue-white control, or perhaps Jeskai control, and either way, this hand's very good against them. Thoughtseize was a very nice draw there. We're going to run out the Blooming Marsh because our life total still might matter a bit. Also, to preserve all of these multiple landfall triggers in case of Tireless Tracker, and it is a blue-white control deck, but they've got more creatures, at least in this hand, than I am used to seeing. They've got Path to Exile, which is stock. They've got Vendilion Click, which is a very good card. I don't know how stock it is in the main deck. I used to play some blue-white control, but that was just in the pre-Jason Terminus days. This used to be a one-of, usually in the sideboard. I could see it main. This is highly unusual main, though. Dragon Lord Ojutai. This is a nice finisher for blue-white control decks, and it's actually got the little mini combo with Minamo right in hand. This untaps a legendary permanent. This is a legendary permanent. Has hexproof as long as it's untapped. So, very hard to deal with this card potentially. Vendilion Click is the more immediate threat to me. Path to Exile right now does nothing because I don't have a creature. I have a Planeswalker as my threat, and even if I do, I don't mind getting my first creature pathed in a matchup like this. Vendilion Click could be a little bit of an issue, but I don't think I should take this simply because Liliana kills it so cleanly. And she looks like she's going to resolve next turn, unless they top deck a Mana Leak or a Logic Knot, basically. Actually, even Logic Knot wouldn't do it, because they don't have anything to put in the graveyard. Sweet. So, yeah. I think I have to take Ojutai. Just look to the long game. And pass to the opponent. Yep, they're just gonna get one of their 3 total colonnades down. Pass to me. Wow, Liliana of the Veil is the draw. So my top deck is being kind to me. First Thoughtseize, then Lily of the Veil. Both very good right now. I go to get my Overgrown Tomb to leave as many basics in the deck as possible. Now, of course, either Planeswalker here is viable, but I think Liliana is the way to go. Just running cards out of the hand against blue-white control is spectacularly good. And if we get them into top deck mode and they top deck a Jace or a Teferi, hopefully we'll still have this in hand to answer it. We also have a very efficient way to pressure it. So even though she would also be a valid play there, I think pressuring their resources is better. We're going to hang on to this Field of Ruin because obviously with all those Celestial Colonnades, we're going to rate that pretty highly. So we pitch a fetch land. They're going to get rid of their third Colonnade. Understandable, but may actually prove to help us in the long run. If we end up in the land destruction wars, they will play Minamo and pass. We're drawing lands, and we're actually kind of happy too because they're things that we're just totally fine to pitch here to Liliana. We can play one and pitch one, and that's fine. So we're going to start off by discarding with Lily. Force them to make a decision with as little information as possible. Once more, we will prioritize keeping hold of Field of Ruin. They're going to ditch their path, okay? So they've still got Vendilion Click. They've got two unknowns. And I'm going to try to resolve this Lily the Last Hope. She resolves. That is quite a relief, I won't lie. Definitely not worth dropping her down into range where they can end-step click, untap, and kill her, in the hopes of maybe milling something over. We've just got to tick her up. Definitely not bad, even though there's nothing to hit with it. So they end-step the click anyway. Definitely makes sense. They target us. Do they let us have the Assassin's Trophy? No, they don't. And we draw Blooming Marsh, so that was nice for them. That said, they cannot cleanly answer a Planeswalker with just this click. They attack the Lily the Last Hope. Okay. That is interesting. So let's take a moment and discuss this, because I think that's actually very important. I expected them to go after Lily of the Veil, and this is why. They're a blue-white deck. They're not playing Lightning Bolt or Electrolyze or Helix to finish off this Last Hope. So they're not going to kill anything this turn as far as our Planeswalkers go, so who does it make more sense to chunk down for 3? In my opinion, it makes more sense to chunk down the Liliana of the Veil for 3. She was at 5, she was at 4. So she is 3 activations away from reaching ultimate. She is 1 activation away from reaching the ultimate threshold. And, okay, this might be a better win condition, but, man, this -6 against a blue-white control deck pretty much wraps up the game most of the time. They just can't recover from losing, half of their lands, plus potentially half of their other permanents, depends on what else they deploy. So why would they do that? Why would they go after Lily the Last Hope? The two things that came to my mind are, number one, they might have more creatures to play. They might have, they might just have more creatures to play, and she's going to be a thorn in the side. The other thing that makes me really suspicious here is that they might have Cryptic Command, and I'm low on cards, so they are banking on me going empty-handed with Liliana of the Veil, and then they can bounce her in response. That's just an old trick with Cryptic Command. I go empty-handed, I tick up the Liliana of the Veil for a non-symmetrical discard effect, feels great, but they Cryptic in response, they're going to draw a card and bounce Liliana, then I have to discard Liliana to her own ability. Feels very bad. So the reason I wanted to take a couple minutes and extrapolate on my thoughts there is because that is a very important thing to read into that attack and therefore play around. And my suspicions are further confirmed when they do not make a play. They've got 2 cards in hand. They're both unknown. I am suspicious for Cryptic Command. So first things first, we're going to make sure we get our clean kill on the Vendi. No mana investment required. Then we're going to take up with both of these cards still in hand because we're playing around the Cryptic Command shenanigans. They don't show us a Cryptic, they're just going to agree to discard, so fair enough. They're going to pitch a Field of Ruin. And I'm going to get frisky here with the Treetop Village. Let's go after him. Maybe this will draw out a removal spell and prove that I'm paranoid about Cryptic Command or something like that. They've got nothing, so they just take 3. And here I will play the Blooming Marsh. We have incentives to make land drop number 6 here because we eventually want to reach a stage where we can activate Treetop while still holding up Field of Ruin. That is pretty important. So even though there is an argument for holding this in hand in case we want to tick Lily up next turn and play around Cryptic, I think we're just going to ult her. Next turn. So, aha, I was right all along about the Cryptic Command, so they're going to wait till the end step, but fair enough, that makes sense. They're going to bounce her, draw a card, and try to rebuild. They play a Hallowed Fountain. And they pass the turn. Okay, Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is a card. I thought about opening on the Thoughtseize, but instead we're just going to play the Liliana. This is the higher upside, so if they have, this just doesn't cost me 2 life to get the card out of their hand, doesn't cost me a mana, not that that matters, and yeah, there's a Spell Snare, so sure, fair enough. I don't know what we really gain from spot checking with Thoughtseize. If they did have a Cryptic Command, then fair enough, but at least if they did Cryptic and draw, we could Thoughtseize whatever they drew. So, Lily will tick up. Again, there's no reason to aggressively down-tick her. This is a long game. We're happy to just continue building equity on our board by taking up the Planeswalkers, even if it doesn't do anything. I was really wanting to fade the draw of an untapped land there. If they could fire up the Celestial Colonnade this turn and remove our Lily of the Veil while our Field of Ruin shields are down, that would have been quite bad. Fortunately, they drew an Opt, so even if they find a land from here, they don't have the mana to activate this turn. Instead, they will find a Kitchen Finks. Okay. Again, this is a card that you sometimes see floating around blue-white lists, but it's a little surprising to see it in the main. And at this point, with the Click, with the Ojutai, and with the Finks, looks like we're facing a more mid-rangey style of blue-white control. One that might not be playing Terminus. Now, I think the Terminus builds of blue-white are completely incredible. They are very, very, very strong. That is the unfair card in a fair deck. No two ways about it. That said, this specifics variant of blue-white control is still quite viable, it's still quite strong, and it's arguably better against us, right? Because we don't, especially against a Terminus deck, we won't really be putting more than one creature on the field at once very often. So Terminus, it's still kind of nice for them, because it can be only 1 mana, they don't ramp us like Path, etc. But all of this mid-rangey stuff, these hard-to-answer threats that present a much quicker clock than the normal blue-white deck does, these recursive value creatures like Kitchen Finks, yeah, this might actually be a tougher matchup. So I am going to tick Lily down here. Now, this is debatable, but I'll explain my rationale. So, number 1, without spending a card, we get to answer the Kitchen Finks. We just have to spend -2 loyalty here, but we still get to be progressing the other Planeswalker toward her ultimate. So we tick one down, we tick the other up, and the Finks is cleanly dealt with. That allows us to also keep this Inquisition of Kozilek in hand. Now, you might have said, well, that's a free discard because they're empty-handed and you can just take up the Lily and take up the Last Hope to make the Finks a 1/1. True, but I, right now, am most afraid of them hitting some kind of rebuild spell in terms of card advantage. Like, hieroglyphic illuminations or Sphinx's revelations, something like that. So I don't mind actually holding this Inquisition for now, in case they do end up rebuilding. That might be nice in the next couple turns, because that's when they would really need to start rebuilding. They find their 6th land, which is enough to activate Field of Ruin, or Colonnade. It also was a Field of Ruin, it's worth noting, so our Treetop Village is now kind of under threat. But they'll activate one, they'll force us to crack the Field of Ruin. Obviously, they knew that would happen, but they've got another one waiting in the wings. We draw an Assassin's Trophy now. That is a fantastic draw. So we want to keep that card in hand for sure. So we're just going to keep ticking our Planeswalkers up. Now we've got to pitch the Inquisition so we can hang on to Trophy. That's fine. I still like our line last turn. And we get to crack in for 3. We haven't really progressed the clock much. The Kitchen Finks has, bought them for life, but hey, that is alright. The game will go along with when these two decks meet. There's no way to get around that. Okay, they go for the Colonnade. Now, this is great for us. This is completely great for us, unless they have a Spell Snare, which they have showed us. It is in the deck, but that card's usually only a 1 of if it's around, 1 or 2 of. And the Trophy gets there. That was huge. That was huge because it lets us... We've dealt with their Colonnades. We've dealt with 2, and they discarded 1 in the early game. They only have 1 more left in the deck. It's actually a tough card for us to beat, especially when we're on the Planeswalker plan. Now, they also have only a Plains open, so we get to freely deploy that fetch land and tick our Lilianas up, and we get a Kitchen Finks out of their hand. That's very good. Now, I'll just say that my opponent messaged me about this and said, hey, do you think that was a misplay? Because he could have deployed the Finks last turn instead of firing up the Colonnade. And I said, nah, man, I think you made the right play. You were being proactive. You were making me have it. You've got to get these Planeswalkers off the field, and that's what he tried to do. We happened to top deck an Assassin's Trophy. It was a heck of a top deck. And while the Finks does offer, some good value, that was playing not to lose. Again, we can cleanly answer it, cleanly enough, by going minus Lily, plus Lily, So I think you made the right play there, my friend. Activate the Treetop Village. Keep cracking in for 3. And our opponent will just scoop there. So, maybe they could have played it out another turn or 2, but apparently they didn't think they could beat the double Lilianas. And to be fair, they are pretty far behind at this stage. I don't know what they drew for turn. Maybe just another land. Yeah, that'd be pretty bad. So, good games. So just to review, the Borderline Keep panned out. It's worth noting, if you're... Not that I necessarily did this game. Hindsight being 2020, I could say I did, but no, I really didn't. But, when you're debating a Borderline hand, you could say, well, if I'm against control, it looks like this. If I'm against combo, it looks like this. If I'm against aggro, mid-range, you name it. We ended up keeping a somewhat sketchy hand that lined up really well against control. We top-decked a turn 2 Thoughtseize and a turn 3 Liliana of the Veil. Those were some great top decks, and from there, I think we sequenced really well, and we just executed the strategy of grinding out the blue-white opponent and taking over the game with a couple of ladies named Liliana. So, good game, well played. Let's go to the side and see what to do against blue-white control. Okay, my friends, we are back. We are looking at the sideboard and we are deciding what to do against blue-white control. Now, worth noting that they're on a little bit more of a creature-heavy mid-rangey plan. They might not be packing Terminus. Just worth noting. So, what do we like? I still say, despite the fact that they're presenting more permanents, this is not a matchup for Engineered Explosives. It's just not gonna cut it. Nile Spellbomb is interesting. So normally I don't really like this against traditional blue-white control. They probably don't play more than 2 Snapcasters in any given build. It's just, if you're actively looking for more stuff to bring in, then sure, it's fine. But That's not the case with our deck, where in fact we have too much to bring in relative to what we want to cut a lot of the time. So, um, now in this particular matchup, this can mess with the Kitchen Finks persist trigger a little bit. It can get the back half of the Finks out of the yard. I still don't think this is quite worth it. If they show us like 4 copies of Kitchen Finks and some Snapcaster Mages and like search for Azcanta, then maybe we'll revisit this for game 3. But for now, I'm gonna say no. But we do have some good stuff to bring in. I still like Fulminator Mage against the blue-white control matchups, even though our Assassin's Trophy can ramp them a little bit. This is still another out to Colonnade. It can just be a Stone Rain early game if we don't see our trophies, especially, or we don't need to hit our trophies. That can be really good. So, Fulminator comes in. I like Maelstrom Pulse. This answer is Jason Teferi, and hey, they didn't show us those cards, but they showed us some other permanents too, so this is going to have targets. Golgari Charm, here I'm going to say no for now. They haven't showed me search for Azcanta sweeping the weenies. Yeah, that kills Vendilion Click, it kills a persisted Finks, but that's just not what we need in this type of matchup. Nissa Vital Force is in. She is a killer against control. She can end the game quickly if she resolves. She can help us grind. She can really help us grind with the ultimate if she gets there, and it doesn't take much for her to get there. So she's fantastic against blue-white control. Obstinate Bailoff, not so much. That's just a clunky threat that we don't need. Choke is in. This is a big matchup. Big reason why we play Choke. Choke is for sure in. We don't need the board wipes, even though they're showing us creatures, I still don't think that's where we want to be. Same for Kalidas, although it's kind of cute to think of killing their Kitchen Finks and them not coming back and us getting zombies. This is still, like, lifelink against blue-white control, and something that incentivizes removal is just not that great. It's a very tempo-negative play if you tap out for him and he gets pathed or countered, so yeah, while he's at least perks my notice up a little bit more than he would against stock blue-white control, still does not make the cut. Surgical Extraction will not come in for the same reason Nile Spellbomb doesn't come in, and then some, because at least Spellbomb cantrips and keeps us even on cards. Extraction does not. Definitely not interested in that in a value-oriented matchup, and card advantage-oriented matchup like this one. Duress and Collective Brutality are both quite good, but they're not as big of bombs as these cards over here. And again, the different structure, the more creature-based variant our opponent is playing, actually makes both of these worse. This card is basically just a spot checker for instants and sorceries against typical blue-white. The life drain can matter, but it's really not, the other modes are really not that relevant. And Duress is, of course, awesome against stock blue-white because they almost always play non-creature spells. Like, that's Duress is basically hitting everything in their deck. That said, it's worth noting that these two, their appeal has dropped now that I've seen that they're on cards like Ojutai and Finks and Click. So maybe we just, for Game 2, side conservatively, bring in those 4, and then go back to for Game 3 and maybe consider revisiting those cards and maybe Nile Spellbomb if what they show us is radically different from what we expect. So for now, let's just take out those 4. Keep these 4 in mind as maybe board, but do we just drop all 4 Fatal Push? Now, they do show us some stuff we can push, like Kitchen Finks and Vendiclick, but honestly, like, Abrupt Decay is a better answer to those things because it can hit other things they might play. Search for Azcanta. If they play a 3-mana Planeswalker like Gideon of the Trials, which actually kind of makes sense in a deck like this that they would. I like the Decay. Collective Brutality, they're still playing plenty of instants and sorceries. I can see leaving in 2, but not bringing in the 3rd, especially leaving these in over Fatal Push, because the -2 kills the front half of the Finks, kills the Vendiclick. So, yeah, everything else is just good. So, I think that's what we do. We could, if they end up presenting even more creatures than we think, maybe we can consider for the maybe board bringing a Fatal Push back. And in that case, I don't know what we'd cut. We'd have to see what they play. But I could even see, because we're bringing in a 1.5 threats, let's say, with Nissa and Fulminator, I could even see cutting one copy of our worst threat, which might be actually Scavenging Ooze if they're not doing that much with the yard, or we could diversify with Tasigur, cutting a Tasigur. I don't know. So one Fatal Push makes the maybe board for me for coming back in, but as far as Game 2 is concerned, without seeing more, I really like this. And just quickly, here's an example of why. Like, I've been big on sideboard plans in the past. I've read sideboard guides, I've followed them to a T. I've even created my own extensive sideboarding guides for taking turns and for Absent Midrange before I switched over to straight Golgari. Here is an example of why you want, they're a fine starting point, but you really want to sideboard against the deck that's in front of you and not against the archetype as a whole. Because if I was just siding against blue-white control, I'd be bringing in for sure Duress and Brutality, and those might not be what we want here, and I might be cutting better cards. So if you are following sideboard guides, don't be dogmatic, and do not be afraid to deviate from them if you have logical reasoning incentivizing you to do so. So just a quick note there, but let's head over to Game 2. Okay, my friends, we are back for Game 2. We're on the draw, as I said, and our hand is eerily similar in pattern to our hand in Game 1. We've got one threat, one piece of interaction, and 5 lands, but a lot of utility coming out of the lands. We've got a man land, and we've got some Fields of Ruin. We know Field is going to be very important in this matchup. We know that man lands are also nice in this matchup, too. We also know that we can afford to have a slow start. Tarmogoyf is a card that they're almost certainly going to have to spend a Path to Exile on, or a Terminus if that's in their deck. So I really like having that to run out on turn 2. It will eventually become a must-answer threat, and Collective Brutality is nice in the matchup. I run the risk of flooding out with this keep, but I think it's a good keep. Certainly a better keep than our Game 1 keep, simply because we didn't know what we were against Game 1. And that worked out just fine, so I'm happy to keep the land-heavy hand against blue-white control. Our opponent will also keep 7. They're going to go Island and pass. Okay. Our top deck is being kind to us, just like it was in Game 1. Man, this is a good draw. Let's hope we can resolve it. So right now, we want to get the gears turning in terms of how we can land this Tireless Tracker. That is now our mission, is to resolve the tracker. So obviously we run out the tapped land first. Island Plains pass. Okay, so we could be running the Tarmogoyf or the Collective Brutality here, whatever we play, into a counterspell. In fact, that's fairly likely. So what do? Well, right now I think we run out the Tarmogoyf because it's the more proactive play, number 1. And number 2, it... if it's a counterspell, that's potentially one less that can hit the tracker. If it's removal, same thing. Alright, they Spell Snare it. So that's not ideal because the Spell Snare couldn't hit the tracker anyway. That said, the Spell Snare was going to be live no matter what we did. So, touche. Now, the fact that they went Island, Plains, I don't know, makes me wonder about what other types of lands they have. You think they could have resolved a shock land or a tap land turn 1, but we'll see. Alright, they've got a Kitchen Finks. Fair enough, that's pretty annoying. Liliana of the Veil. This would be such a good draw right now if they didn't have the Finks, because then we could run her out, play her. If they counter her, like spending something that could hit the tracker like a Monolith, that's fine. If they don't counter her, that's even better because she must be dealt with. We can still do that, but they're going to find it fairly easy to deal with her because they have the Kitchen Finks. That said, she's still going to buy us some time. They might strangely kind of be the aggro at the moment. We're trying to win the long game with Tireless Tracker, and they're on the play. They've got the recursive 3-power threat down, so Maybe we just have to play the Liliana, take her up, start depleting their resources. We certainly have some excess lands we can afford to pitch here. Even with Tracker involved, I think that's still clear. So yeah, like, I think that's better than spot checking their hand with Brutality and just leaving the board open, or, you know, just killing the front half of the Finks with Brutality. Both of those seem a little poor. Let's play the Lily. Let's get something out of their hand, and let's force them to start attacking the Liliana with their Kitchen Finks. So we pitch a forest, they pitch an island. Fair enough. They do have a lot of basics in hand, like I kind of assumed, and they have a Field of Ruin. That's a nice one. Here comes the Kitchen Finks, Lilies to 1. So I say the Field of Ruin is nice, and it is, but do note that they do not have Cryptic Command mana. They don't have the Cryptic. That's very good for us. So the first thing we'll do is take up the Liliana, but the fact that we drew a land here just means that we're still on the Tracker plan. So I pitched a Field of Ruin here. You could argue that I'm supposed to pitch the Blooming Marsh. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's just a pretty clean play to play Tracker into a tapped Blooming Marsh, because you can't crack the clue with just 1 mana anyway. But maybe I should have held on to that field just to battle through more Colonnades. They don't have one yet, at least. Tireless Tracker resolves. Alright. Feels so good. That was the big nail-biter moment of the game, at least thus far. So, we're probably not going to trade away our Tracker. Liliana's going to go down, but you know what? We've got our clue. Life is good. Let's see if they've got anything in the end step here. Restoration Angel. Yep. Okay, that's pretty good. It's also worth noting, I think that's another way to protect Dragon Lord Ojutai. So that's a nice little synergy, but really it's here to blink cards like Kitchen Fink. So now I am extra glad I didn't decide to Brutality that card, because that would have been very wasteful. So now that we cannot protect the Liliana even if we wanted to, sensing that we don't want to take the trade, our opponent will wisely take the role of aggro. They're going to get in with the Finks at us and with the Angel at Lily. Wall of Omens. Wow, this is really the mid-rangey style of blue-white control. Okay, we're drawing more lands, and guess what? That's awesome, because we got the Tracker. I love this card. I can't say it enough. So we're going to crack a clue to start out. Draw an Assassin's Trophy. That's a good one. That is a good one. That is a very, very good one. And in fact, I think I kind of want to use it now. So I'm going to get my assured value. We're getting the clue for the turn. Then we're going to attack with a Tracker. We got to show no fear, right? We've got to start the clock. We don't want to play defense. Like, we could, in theory, leave the Tracker back, leave the clue up. That makes it big enough where the Finks can attack into it. We're still at 17. You know, they've got a fast clock by blue-white standards, but it's still not all that fast. Like, we've got to be proactive, too. They're going to take the block. Fair enough. I don't mind that. Prevents any further Restoration Angel shenanigans with the Wall of Omens. And while they are off of Cryptic mana, if that might be in their hand still, we are just going to get this Resto out of here. Answer that cleanly. See what the opponent does. They've got another Kitchen Finks. Okay. We're going to have to grind through a lot of these things this game, apparently, and they do play a Celestial Colonnade. That is a good one for them right now, because they are in the driver's seat as far as being the aggro is concerned. That said, we have this other Field of Ruin we have been sandbagging, and now it feels pretty good to lay that one out. Now, these cards, so I did end up bringing in the Duress, even though in the sideboard tech I said we left it in the maybe board. I don't remember what I did, frankly. It's something very close, right along those lines, and Part of the nice thing as far as these videos being a didactic experience goes is I've already played the whole matchup by the time I go back and look at it a second time for the replay and do the sideboard. So the sideboard and the sideboard decisions are actually even more informed in the sideboard tech than they were when I made them in the actual games, if that makes sense. We're going to crack a clue, using our duels aggressively to keep our utility lands open. We find another Field of Ruin. That's a fine one. We're just going to field this thing now. There's no reason not to. They don't have any cards in hand to take advantage of the mana, and we get to make sure we get that clue with Tracker. We get to make sure the field goes off without a hitch. So now we are interested in just brutalitying a Finks. Feels a little bit bad, feels a little bit wasteful. We're trading one card for half a card, and they could top deck an Angel and then even rewind the half card progress we made. But you will have noticed a pattern by now if you've seen enough of my videos, where when you start going off with Tracker, when you're making clue upon clue upon clue and making many land drops, you just want to play your spells. You just want to use your mana efficiently every turn because there's going to be more spells and more clues where that came from. You just don't want to get clogged up in hand and not be able to leverage your advantage. So even if it's a kind of mediocre play like that, you are a lot more incentivized to make those when you have the Tracker single-handedly winning you the game than you would otherwise be. So I don't really know what this attack means. My life total is starting to get under threat, so I'm going to take the block on the bigger one. If they've got some kind of tricks, we've already gotten plenty of value out of the Tracker, but no, it just seems like they're trying to keep being the aggro. They don't mind throwing that away because it comes back. Fair enough. We'll play another Field of Ruin, get another clue. So now we don't need to hold up the field right now, so we'll use that to crack our clue. We're finding more lands. Alright. Let's crack another clue. So we're not getting in with the man lands this turn, we're just going to fill up our hand. Liliana's a pretty nice draw. They've got a card in hand, they've got creatures on the field. Whichever way we use the Lily, she could prove good. So they're going to take a block. Our Tracker is a 7/6 now. Like, oh, the card. The card just makes me so happy. Oh, it's incredible. Alright, we're going to try the Liliana. She resolves. Okay, so the fact that she resolves, like, obviously they don't have counter magic or they would have spent it there. Any type of counter magic that sees play except maybe a Spell Snare, which I don't think I care about anymore too much, would have answered her there. So if we tick her up, we're going to lose one of our resources, and who knows what they have. Maybe they've got, you know, like a Sphinx's Revelation or something to do at instant speed. Maybe they can flash in a Vendilion Click. Like, ticking up does not seem like it's going to accomplish anything. Maybe I have a blind spot there. Maybe I'm sure there are some things they could have that make sense for me to tick up on. But for now, I just take the guaranteed value of taking down to Edict that Finks and clear up the board. It's also worth noting that leaving a card in hand doesn't feel as bad because we have a couple of hand disruption spells in hand. That's the other reason I chose to tick her down. So they play an island and pass. We draw yet another discard spell. We're going to make sure we get our Tracker value. We're cracking a clue. We've got all the hand disruption now. It's a pretty awkward time in the game to draw it. So pretty clearly we just tick up the Lily here. We're happy to pitch. Thought about the Inquisition, then I remembered how many creatures they're on, and I'm like, yeah, let's get rid of this duress. And yeah, they were just sandbagging a land. Fair enough. Let's crack another clue, beef up our Tracker yet more, get more cards, and hey, oh man, I was all ready to fire up the village, but you know what? I think I'd rather play this choke. Seems pretty fine to me. So we get to choke him out, we get to crack in with our 9/8, and we get to pass turn with significant card advantage and a Liliana on field. Plus 2 man lands, plus a Field of Ruin. We just have it all. They find a Path to Exile off the top. Alright, they have finally dealt with our tracker. That's step 1 for them. But boy, oh boy, do they have an uphill battle to go. And we promptly replace the tracker with another threat. So we have enough of these extraneous discard spells that we can just pitch the worst one to keep the Lily ticking up. And here, we're just going to fire up the Treetop Village and fire up the Hissing Quagmire, which is pretty cool that we have enough mana to animate and swing with both of those, and then play the Tarmogoyf. Whoops, I knew I shouldn't have clicked through that, so yeah, that's right, they did the Field of Ruin activation on Treetop Village. We knew that was coming, can't play around it, we just might as well make him use it. And we still got to get in for 2, play the Goyf. They're choked, Lily's taken up, and they just find another land. Pretty good for us. A land right now for us is not a very good draw, but at least it is a man land. Definitely cannot turn my nose up at that. And yeah, we are just going to animate and swing for 7. Opponent's going to scoop it up. If they did find a big payoff card, it better be one that can simultaneously deal with the choke, because that's going to kind of keep them locked down, at least to a significant degree. Field of Ruin can exacerbate that, potentially. You know, you have them... Well, not necessarily. It depends on what we hit. But, like, you know, if they had, like, a Glacial Fortress, we could hit it with a Field of Ruin. Then they have to replace it with a basic island if they want a blue source, which is kind of one use only under the auspices of choke. Anyway, doesn't end up mattering because we were too far ahead and our opponent decided that they had seen enough. So, very, very cool game 2. Very satisfying game 2 from this side of the table because Tireless Tracker drew us an unholy number of cards and was a 9-8 cracking in and putting them all the way down from 28 back to a normal life total, to the point where the subsequent Tarmogoyf and Quagmire tandem that followed up the Path Tracker could put the game away. But wow. Tireless Tracker, very good. So while the Lilianas were kind of the stars of Game 1, with a nice little assist from Assassin's Trophy to keep them alive against a Colonnade, here in Game 2, it was all about the Tracker, baby. Tireless Tracker, just cannot say enough good words about that card. I still like Dark Confidant. I think people who say that Dark Confidant's time has passed or that he's no longer good in Modern, he's a liability too often. I do not agree with that. I think Bob is a strong choice. That said, I think he is becoming more and more a Jund card. The red cards in Jund are like, they're still very good, but Bloodbright Elf, for example, there is a real deck building cost to including her. And it doesn't have the overwhelming power level that some people feared she might have, or at least thought she had when she was banned in the first place. So, while Jund is still good, in my opinion, and the red cards are still good, increasingly the red cards are less just like the best cards around, so you just play the pile of good cards in your mid-range deck, and they're more best in the sense of ending the game quickly. So when you take the question of whether to splash red into context, I think that's what you're asking yourself is, am I interested in ending the game as quickly as is realistic for a BGX mid-range deck? Dark Confidant's great at that. But if you are not playing red, then you have already kind of said, no, that's not my highest priority, is ending the game quickly. So with that in mind, I think Tireless Tracker, as you saw here, it is worth making that card a build around. It is just so good. In my humble opinion, the card is off the chain. Truly a pleasure to pilot the deck when it's going off like this. It's just it's just a sight to behold. So we took down blue-white control 2-0. We took down the variant that is less common and probably less powerful overall, but arguably it's kind of the version of blue-white you would play in a mid-range meta. It's arguably better against us than stock blue-white, and our opponent played it very well. So GG, well played to them. And as always, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I hope the last couple of videos have been both interesting and instructive. I try to strike the balance between the two. Sometimes I might talk a little bit too long for some people's tastes, but that's because I really want to explore the reasoning behind why we do things. And you know, I guess it's just in my nature. I never really shut the hell up, so I might as well not try to modulate that and just let her rip here. So hopefully that's enjoyable for you. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. I hope you have a great night, and I will see you for the next one.